Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to the late one on the Silburn Show and the topic which is dialogue that matters. And tonight, my topic is going to be on flourishing in Babylon by Reverend Joe Aldred, which is the book, and we're going to have a discussion tonight. And the dialogue that matters is what brings key topics, key ideas, key discussions that matters on this Sunday evening. And the professor, I'm going to, I always like to ascribe Dr. Joe Aldred with professor and all these different names, you know. Well, Reverend Dr. Joe Aldred is a prominent Jamaican-born British religious leader, broadcaster, and scholar with a multifaceted career spanning several decades. Born in Jamaica in 1952, emigrated to the UK at 16, and has since become an influential figure in the UK church and broader community. That's Dr. Joe Aldred. And one of the interesting thing is that he's been a bishop in the Church of God of Prophecy, former secretary of Minority Ethnic Christian Affairs at Church Together in England, principal officer of Pentecostal, Charismatic, and Multicultural Religions. Notable contributions: radio broadcaster with a weekly show on BBC West Midlands, author of multiple books, including today, Flourishing in Babylon. You know, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about flourishing in Babylon because, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes when we come to the UK, we come to the different parts of the world, we ask the question like, can we survive in these countries? Can we survive here? And I always say, yes, we can. I always say the dream. What is your dream? And Flourishing in Babylon, Black British Agency on Self-Determination by Joe Aldred offers a fresh perspective on the Black British experience, drawing inspiration from the biblical book of Jeremiah. And some are just a couple points is that Aldred challenges the traditional narrative of Black theology, focused solely on oppression and liberation. He proposes a story of flourishing through agency and self-determination. The book also encourages Black British people to build communities and to establish roots in Britain while maintaining ties to African and Caribbean homelands. Without further ado, I'm going to bring in Mr. Aldred. I think we sort of lost touch for a moment, but he's going to be coming in very shortly on the discussion. And I want to welcome those who are on Instagram and those who are on Facebook as well. And of course, there's going to be the the podcast version on Spotify, where you can also watch that and listen to it as well, giving a different perspective, and therefore it works out for different readership. The the while we're talking about it, and while I wait for Dr. Joe Aldred to come on, um, reframing the narrative and the theological grounding, the Pentecostal perspective, diaspora and identity. You know, book explores the complexities of diaspora identity, acknowledging the challenges of racism and discrimination while also celebrating the richness of Black British culture. Flourishing in Babylon offers a message of hope and empowerment, encouraging Black Britons to flourish in their context and contribute to the wider society. It provides a valuable framework for understanding the Black British experience and promoting also social justice. Yeah. The book draws on Jeremiah's message to the exiles, urging them to settle, build houses, and plant gardens in Babylon. Aldred applies this message to the Black British context, encouraging a sense of belonging and active participation in society. I will also maybe push it further by to say that it also stretches also into different parts of the hemisphere. One is in Germany, one is in USA, one is in Canada as well. That's also another perspective. While I wait for um, Professor Joe Aldred, and here's a cover of the book here. There it is. Flourishing in Babylon, Black British Agency Self Determination of Joe Aldred. And of course, you can get the book also at Amazon. Um, you know, definitely you can order it as well. Mr. Joe Aldred, and there, Mr. Aldred, there, as I said before, Mr. Aldred is the prominent Jamaican born British religious leader, broadcaster, scholar with multifaceted career spanning several decades. Born in Jamaica, 1952, emigrated to the UK at 16, and has since become an influential figure in the UK church and broader community. Um, Alred is widely respected for his work in bridging racial and denominational divides within the Christian community and for his ongoing commitment to community action, media engagement, and social injustice. Yeah. Bishop in Church of God of Prophecy, former secretary for minority ethnic Christian affairs at churches together in England, principal officer for Pentecostal charismatic and multicultural relations, PhD in theology, master's in theology and ministry with distinction, honorary research fellow at Roehampton University, radio broadcaster with a weekly show on BBC West Midlands before, notable for that, author of multiple books, including Flourishing in Babylon, advocate for economism and racial justice, membership of National Church Leaders Forum, former member of the Windrush Government Working Group. That's Mr. Joe Aldred. Well, what should I say? It's a great evening today in the UK. Today is the 15th of the 12th. And and without further ado, I will bring in Mr. Joe Aldred. Good evening and welcome, Dr. Joe Aldred. How are you doing, sir?
Good evening. I'm very well, thank you, Silburn. Very pleased to join you and your audience tonight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And it's a very beautiful day. It's a lovely day. We, as they say, sometimes people will say, "Oh, the weather is horrible," but you can flourish in different weathers, isn't it? As we talk about flourishing
In
in the
fact,
book.
I have a little secret to tell people, which is that all four seasons of the year are equally important. You have to learn to flourish in them all.
Indeed, and therefore, if you actually forego one, you're missing out on something important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Life is as growing up they used to talk about hill and gully rido. If you're going to ride, you have to learn to navigate the hill and the gully, because that is all what life is about. It's the ups and the
Yeah.
downs.
Do you know that you and I we walk in the park? It's a pity I didn't have a picture of yourself there walking in the park. Um, I like to look at the leaves at this time of
Yes.
the year, but just before the winter came in, and the leaves all fall down. It looks so beautiful, and you
Yes.
look at the trees and they're empty,
Yeah.
and the leaves on the ground, and you realize that they're going through a cycle
Yeah.
because the leaves are actually shedding from that tree because there's going to be some new freshness coming in.
And if they don't go, the new ones won't come.
And the important thing also about the leaves on the ground, they actually nourish the earth again at the same time.
Yes, sir. It's cyclic,
Yes,
and we too much of the fast food modern day lifestyle
yes,
simplifies everything. It's like everything now must be an ice cream, or
yes,
but if you are going to be healthy, then you need a rounded diet,
yes,
and so too does nature. Nature teaches us that.
yes,
And by
yes.
the very fact that you're talking about there, we're just the other day when I went out, I take different routes when I walk.
So nobody can
um
find it. Well, yeah. You switch up on them.
yeah,
You
I
switch
was
up on them.
told that years ago. I was told that years ago that you mustn't, if you walk anywhere, don't want to see him way back, just in case the devil is lay waiting you. So you have to fool him. So yeah, so when I go, I walk in different directions, just
Yes,
deliberately, because that's the way life is. And the other day,
yes,
in one of the routes, there were so many leaves on the ground. You were walking on them. It was like padding
yes,
on the walkway. Walk
yes,
there now after
mm,
some breeze has blown, and the pavement is pretty much clear.
Yes.
The leaves have been blown somewhere, but yes, they've gone somewhere to nourish the ground.
Yes, yes. Well, it's very interesting that you came on, and we start off with the whole aspect of flourishing, and the interesting thing, sir, is regarding your book, which is flourishing in Babylon. Flourishing Babylon. What's the dream, sir? You're been in this country for a while. What's your dream? At this time, you're saying you're flourished already, but tell us what's your message? What's the message you're trying to conjure, send through? Um, Sir Aldred.
Through the book.
Yes.
Well, if I try to put it simply, which I have a great challenge with, but if I
Yes.
try to put it simply, it is to say where we are, where I am, where you are,
Mm,
you and I are there with God in us. Hmm? We are made in the
yes.
image of God, and especially as believers in God, we feel affirmed that wherever I am, God is there with me. So, what is also there are lots of challenges. What I'm trying to get across in the book is in the context of this country where we live, in the
Yes.
presence of God and with other neighbors. What we must not do is get caught up with all of the negativities and the challenges and what I call in the book false prophets who tell us a particular message about how impossible it is to succeed, and especially how impossible it is to succeed without their intervention. And and,
Mm,
I will come on to talking about it later. But a race industry has been built, and it is as though the people who run that industry have a vested interest in ensuring that people that look like you and me in this country never believe that we can actually succeed here because we have to get rid of racism first.
mm,
And I look at my children, I've got three grown daughters, I've got some grandchildren and lots of friends. And I say, that is a terrible message to tell you if you live here. So the
mm,
message is simply that wherever your Babylon may be, you can flourish. And of course, I go on to lay out in the book based on Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 29, and a
yes.
message he sent to people who were in the real Babylon, fifth, sixth century BCE, and he wrote to them. And in his letter, he's telling them, now you find yourself in Babylon. Here is what you ought to do to flourish there.
Can you break down and juxtapose the Babylon then and the Babylon today? So we can growing up in Jamaica, when we hear Babylon, we say Babylon a come, which is police. The
Yes,
police come
yes,
after you and say Babylon, dreadlocks, and say Babylon a come mash up. you know. So if you can conjure up so we can have a picture of Babylon then and Babylon today,
sure.
the
So,
environment. Yes.
fifth, sixth century Babylon was
Mm,
an empire. Um, we've heard, most people know what an empire is: superpower that extends
yes.
way beyond its own boundaries and
Yes.
rule over people. But empires are always seeking to conquer and to pull others into its orbit. So the Babylon of fifth, sixth century that literally existed was one of those powers with Nebuchadnezzar and other rulers as its head. What they were a major power of their day. And Judah and Jerusalem, the people of the nation of Israel, were one of the people that they conquered. And in conquering them, they laid siege to the city of Jerusalem and took over Judah, and they took away to Babylon, several of their top people, talent, the gifted ones, the ones who they feel they could use.
Mm.
Um, and so what you had, it wasn't all of, not everybody from Judah were taken to Babylon, but they took there, if you like, the creme de la creme, the
Yes.
young men. We used to some of them in scripture, people like we read about Daniel, for example,
Yes.
and his
Yes.
his friends and others. So we know of some of them. Some were born there, but some were taken there. And they, whilst they were there as captives, slaves, if you like.
Mm.
Um, they certainly did not go there of their own accord. Now, I
Yes.
am, and as I said, Jeremiah is sharing with them as a prophet of God
Yes.
what they needed to do to ensure their flourishing in that foreign land. So what I'm doing is I'm borrowing the metaphor, I'm borrowing the literal Babylon of 5th, 6th century. I'm using it as a metaphor for people like myself who now find ourselves in England. Um, Britain, of course, Great Britain used to be a power.
Yes.
It used to have an empire. That's why it still gives out honors with the Order of the Empire, a member of empire. It used to have an empire. It was said, but wasn't it, that the sun never set
Mm.
on the British Empire because it was
Yes.
so big. And as one writer quite rightly said, we are here because you were there. So
Yes.
we are here because of empire. It
Mm.
is because of the slave trade, for example, that my foreparents, ancestors, were taken from Africa and taken to the Americas and to the Caribbean, where I
Yes.
was born in Jamaica. And then from Jamaica, life was so tough for my father that he emigrated again, this time of
Yes.
his own volition, but driven
Mm.
by economic deprivation. So
Mm.
he comes and he lives here. He sends for me as a little boy and brings me to England. So you can see the mirroring of the experience of the Jews who were taken from Judah, Jerusalem, down to Babylon or up to Babylon,
Yes.
and they then found themselves away from, the people that they know, and they're in a strange land. And the question is, how are you going to get on here? How are you going to ensure that you're not
Yes.
just a prisoner, that you're not just a victim of the situation that has occurred to you? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm saying
Yes. Yes.
I'm
Yeah, yeah.
marrying the two. I'm saying that
Yes.
which happened then. I'm not saying it's exactly the same in every way, but I am
Yes.
saying there are many parallels. And in
Yes.
particular, I am suggesting that what the prophet Jeremiah had to say to the exiles, as he said in his letter to the exiles, I believe are pertinent points for us in Britain today.
And it's very interesting that you use the biblical concept because they say at times that the rain fall on the just and the unjust, the powerful, what should I say, what should I say, the scriptures. One sometimes may not believe in God, but one can never actually dismiss the fact that the scriptures work. Seed time, harvest time, what you sow you shall reap. Those are strictly biblical principles. you know how do you see the concept then of flourishing applying to different generations within the Black British community? Because we just came through this period, not just came through this period, we have been through the Windrush period for a while, but we see what has happened with the Windrush sector. And so therefore there were then, when our people came here, separate and apart from taken from the boats, but came from another boat, the Windrush Empire, to the UK, flourishing then and flourishing now. The different generation within the Black British community. How do you link those, sir?
Well, if I go back to the text that I'm basing much of the book on, Jeremiah
Yes,
29,
yes,
there is an intergenerational sense to that experience, which I'm also
Yeah.
encouraging us to consider for where we are. So the folks who were taken, for example, from Judah to Babylon, they
Mm.
then had children. And aren't we familiar with the psalm? By the rivers of Babylon, there
Babylon
we sat
sat
down,
down.
there we
Yes.
wept when we remembered Zion.
Zion.
Mm?
Yes.
So as it went from one generation to the other, it's clear that they were having challenges in coping. What we've seen here in this country, we hear often, or sometimes we hear it, younger people say, well, I see my parents work in factory. I am not going to work in a factory, right?
Mm.
But of course, it's one thing to say you're not going to work in a factory, but somebody has to help that person to understand that simply saying you're not going to work in a factory doesn't give you a better life, right? So if you want a different kind of job, you're going to need to try and ensure that you seek ways of equipping yourself for that better job that you want.
Mm.
What we also have, though, of course, is ever present with us this sense of racism in the structures of the place to which we have come. Um, I suspect that if you were to go back to the Jews that were taken from Judah to Babylon, that they too will have been categorized as the other. You are not from here. You are our victims, if you like.
Mm.
Um, and so, how are they going to find? How are they going to punch their way out of that situation? I am simply saying that if we look at what our folks did when they came here, again comparing them, to my Jeremiah 29:11 example. When my parents came here, for example, my dad came here in 1955.
Yes.
He was just barely literate, as was the case with my mom. He got a job which he's stuck to for many, many years, 30 odd years, if not more, in a drop iron foundry factory in not out just outside of Birmingham, right?
Yes.
Um, he, like so many others, did not intend to stay here. He intended to come for 5 years,
Yes.
and he did, in fact, return to Jamaica after 5 years. He returned in 1959, but he found the money ran out very quickly, so he had to come back. And having come back, he worked here until he retired, and soon after that, he went to live in Jamaica. So, what has changed? The world has become much more technological. We're now in the age of AI. So my father, who couldn't hardly read and write, not very well, right? What he has passed on to me is an ambition which drove me and my siblings
Mm.
to pursue an education. I fortunately went on to complete a PhD in theology in Sheffield University that has opened up enormous amount of doors for me, places that I've gone to where my dad would not even have read about in a
Mm.
book, right? Because of the legacy that I have had. So I guess in a nutshell, what I'm saying is we have to work out our own methodology for how we are going to succeed as the equivalence of what my dad did when he came and looked around to see what he could find to do.
So I will draw the conclusion right there that that was flourishing in a certain
Indeed.
way. That was flourishing in a certain way amidst Babylon, amidst the structure, amidst
Indeed.
racism and everything like that. And bringing it over to today, now it is how you want to actually challenge or flourish within the structure. But you said something which is crucial. You said there are elements which are out there which are set to keep us down
Yes.
indirectly by default.
Yes. Yes. One of the lines in my book is where I say that the promised land
Yes.
is a place of giants.
Mm.
If you go back to the story that I'm basing this on, when the
Yes.
children of Israel, as they got near to the promised land, what they found was they sent out some spies, didn't they?
Yes.
And when they came back, they said, "Well, we've seen the pomegranates, we've seen the olives, we've seen, but there are giants, right?"
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that the situation we're in, which is common to all diasporan challenges, by the way, wherever you are, especially when you're dealing with neo-colonial powers that have
Mm.
fixed and historically fixed views about you. What many white people were told about black people is that we're lazy,
Yeah.
we're ugly, we're only good to follow instructions, and only then if whipped and threatened and so
Mm.
forth, right? So we are in this situation now where we are having to deal with that. We're having to deal with so many ingrained prejudices against us that some of us are surprised, right? And I'm saying, why are you surprised? Uh,
Mm.
did you not know that Britain is the same country that took part with a lot of other European countries in the slave trade? Are you not aware that it was they who worked your foreparents on cane fields and cotton fields
Yes.
and beat them and kill some of them? And
Masculine.
anytime
Yeah.
they were feisty enough to suggest that they want more freedom, you would hang their ringleaders. Paul
Mm.
Bogle will tell you. Are you not aware of the history that we're part of? So when I come to England, I say in the book that I remember that my first waking up was when somebody called me a colored boy.
Mm.
So a little colored boy. And
Yes.
growing up in Jamaica till I was nearly 16, nobody had ever called me a colored boy.
Yeah.
It was a phrase I was not used to. And then,
Mm.
of course, as again I talk about, I'm in the car, I'm sitting in the car in my responsible job at Celio College's Center for Black and White. Rather, I'm walking and some lad sitting in the car. And one of them wind the window down, stretch his hand outside with a banana in it and saying, "Excuse me, mate, did you lose this?" Right?
Mm.
And many other examples I could give you. So I say to folks, that kind of incident must not keep on surprising us.
Yes.
Stop being surprised that Britain has racism in its structures. What we
Yes.
should be spending our time on is working out, right, how can I, given the many giants that there are in this land,
Mm.
how am I going to flourish here? And one of the people that one of the sector that gets a lot of flack from me in this book, well, two sectors. One is the area of Black theology,
Yes.
where I believe we've got some really, really incisive critique of white racism and white imperialism and colonialism and neocolonialism,
Mm.
etc., etc., etc. We got some really bright minds going at this, particularly since James Cone wrote his first book, Black Theology and Black Power, in the 1960s, right? But
Yes.
I contend that what it is doing for the most part is critiquing whiteness and showing us again and again in many different ways how
Mm.
wicked white people can be, right? Now, I'm saying there is a place for that,
Mm.
but how about showing me, given the wickedness of this place, how about helping me to see how I can overcome it, how I
Mm.
can combat it? How about spending some of that lively mind
Mm.
working out how, through my own agency and sense of purpose, sense of self determination, I and my community can flourish If all you're
So
ever
what?
going to do is
Yeah.
tell me about how terrible the place is and
Yes.
describe the terribleness of it and have all kind of books published and films made about
Yes.
how terrible it is, the one thing I want to know, how can I overcome here?
So what?
How
Yes.
can I flourish
Yeah.
here? Why aren't you telling me? And the
Yes.
second
Yes.
group, I mentioned Black theology because I
Yes.
think it does a very good job of critiquing whiteness, as I call it. But that is not enough, as I've said. But the second people who I feel do a very similar thing are those who are the practitioners and the expert in the race industry. The Americans have a term they call race hustlers,
Yes.
right? You know, everybody have a side hustle, right? So race hustlers for me are those for whom anti-racism is like a career. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a career, and I contend with them that they have to be careful that they are not so enveloped in their career that they think
Mm.
that the liberation that they talk about is never coming. Hmm?
Mm.
Because they're not least because they're not actually helping you to liberate yourself. What the folks I'm talking about here in the race industry are constantly telling us that you can't be what you can't see. That's
Mm.
one of the lies they tell. And I'm saying, what about imagination? What about dreams? Hmm?
Yes.
They keep telling us that until racism is gotten rid of out of this country, we have to get rid of it out of the country,
In order.
out of society, you can't succeed.
Mm.
And thirdly, they keep on telling me that the only way I can succeed is if I have some white allies. Hmm? So basically, what they're telling me is that I do not have within me
Mm.
the ability, the power to succeed against the odds which are placed against me. So what am I left with? I'm left with the same white people that is being cussed down.
Mm.
They are the ones who they're going to have to give way. They have to give up power. So therefore, what are these many what I call false prophets in the book? What are they telling us? They're telling us that you got to shame white people into stop being so horrible. You know, can't you see I'm a human being? Why are you being
Mm.
so nasty to me? You should love me. You know, so in the church, especially the mainstream churches, you know, a lot of times telling the white folks, you know, look how you're treating the black members of the Anglican Church or the black
Yes.
members. Now, none of that is wrong, you know. The only
Yes.
bit of it that I'm saying is wrong is the bit where they don't go. Where they don't go to is saying black Anglican, black
Mm.
Methodist, black Pentecostal, whoever you are, you cannot put your fate in the hands of those you've already established don't wish you well.
Mm.
Why do you want to put your future into those hands? By saying until they change, I've heard black people say, until white people stop being racist, there is nothing I can do.
You well, I mean, I do recall one time there was a, I think she was a head or a deputy head of a school, and she said, she was pointing out to me a point, and she said this is not going to take us anywhere. She was actually pointing on her skin tone, and I was saying, wow. I
Yes,
said, well, I said, I'm glad actually my son is not at that school, you know, for that
yes,
mentality there. But what you have said also is a strong point when you said the overcoming mentality. And you use a biblical person. Oh, by the way, I just want to say welcome to Reverend Ezekiel Thompson and also John Fisher from IDMC, and also hi to Michelle Clark as well, persons who have joined us on the live as well. And those on Instagram as well, welcome as well. I got TikTok on the overflow, but you only see my face. If you want to see the beautiful face of Dr. Joe
uh,
Aldred, you got
they'll
to go
hear
on,
my melodic tones.
you go on YouTube, you know. But it is very interesting about the overcoming mentality, because when we look at the Daniel, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we look at the Moses and we look at the Joseph, they operated in a sphere at that time whereby the pressure was all around them, but the
Yes,
excellence of spirit and the excellence of mind um, have them becoming a very strong factor, where the kings who presided over them had to recognize the greatness in these persons, which is so very
Yes.
important.
Well,
And
listen, through the book, people will see, and I hope that those who are with us and those who will listen afterwards will go
mm,
and pick up a copy. It's cheapest on Amazon.
yes,
Through the book, I am making the point that one of the things that drives me is some righteous anger. Hmm?
mm.
Because
Are you going to take the whip? Are you going to be taking the whip and hitting person out of
no, no. Well, only Allah Jesus in the temple, maybe.
the
But no, I've given up the whip. I saw enough of it when I at primary school in Jamaica. But anger at the way in which those who have the mic
mm,
in the public square for us in this country seem to be so adamant that we can't help ourselves.
mm,
We cannot liberate ourselves. We can only be liberated by the people who are oppressing us. And I say to myself, I do not want to bequeath that kind of mentality to my children or my grandchildren. I do not. I do not want them to believe that they are in this place, and until white people stop being racist, they cannot succeed in life. I do not want them to have that as a view. A, because it's not true, right?
yes,
I mean, what you have in the world, what you have in this country. I noticed recently, um, Professor Andrews. I quietly have a look at some of what he posts. Has been saying that there is no such thing as a racist person. His argument is that racism is a system. mm,
mm,
And there are individuals who, utilize the tools of that system, but it's the system that is the problem. Well, I actually would not disagree with him, at least not 100% disagree. I wholly generally agree. Um, but there is also in the world right now a sort of spirit of imperialism. We know, for example, in Jamaica, where you and I both are from, there was a time when Michael Manley, I'm not sure his politics would ever work. It's too leftist for me. But he when he was trying to get Jamaica to think about itself, to pull up itself, and to stand up straight in the world, right? And he started to do things like getting close to Cuba, where what America then did was just to flood the country with drugs and guns. And before long, the leader was just not in favor anymore because the country
yeah,
is falling apart, right? So there are powers, and we see this happening a lot in Africa, where the West cannot let go of its old imperial supremacy and so on. And so, they try to get people in place who will play ball with them and so on. So that system of imperialism is as old as humanity itself. One could say that's Cain over Abel and so on, who want to have authority over. So if you narrow it down then to this country, you're then trying to find out, right, what are the issues here? And what we do find here is that, and those who came here first, earlier rather, in the Windrush era, they experience some of the harshness of the teddy boys on the street and of trying to
yeah,
buy a house or going to find a job. And once you get there, they say, oh, sorry, the job is no more. And so they experience a lot of things now that are a bit swept under the carpet now. But whether
mm,
it's then with overt racism or now with more covert racism, the one thing that I think is common, it is that I must survive. Who is the singer who sings, I will survive, right? No
yes,
matter where I am, I have got to find ways and never listen to anybody who says, not
mm,
until the challenges are removed can you succeed. Not until
mm,
racism is driven out of society can you succeed.
Yeah.
So what they're actually telling you is that you don't have
Yeah.
any agency to make
Yeah.
your life what it is that you want. And I'm
Yeah.
saying
Well,
that is a
yeah.
lie.
Mm. Could it be
That is a
said
lie.
that, yeah, could it be said, Sir Aldred, that one is being, or some would say, are you being a bit accepting and not fighting? Does that make sense? Being a bit accepting and
Listen,
not,
it makes absolute sense because
yes. Mm.
it has been put to me more than once. I
Yes.
remember when I published one of my books earlier, in earlier years, I think it was the one Thinking Outside the Box.
Yes.
Somebody said to me, but you're letting white people off the hook, they
Mm.
said, right? And I said, only if you don't hear what my argument is.
Yes.
My argument is not 100% not a denial of the existence of racism. Hmm?
Mm.
In fact, through this book and any other books I've written, but particularly this one, you'll see that I'm going back to the transatlantic slave trade. If I want to point the finger of blame, I'm going right back to the transatlantic slave trade, and I'm going back to the slave colony that was
Mm.
Jamaica, on which my father was born, and on which he couldn't find work to look after his whole heap of children, and so had to come and live here. So I am absolutely in agreement, as I was just mentioning Kehinde Andrews there, Professor, that racism is in the structure and the fabric of society. I agree with that. Which doesn't mean that you can't find
Yes.
friends and allies and so on. Doesn't mean that at all. Because there are some, I've been helped along my way by many, many white people, in addition to many, many black people,
Yeah.
and so on. So I'm
Mm.
not saying, but what I am saying is, and the reason I am not soft on racism is my point of departure is not its existence. My point of departure is
Mm.
how you deal with it,
How do, how you deal with it?
how you deal with it. And I'm saying to those who say you should spend all of your time chasing after racists or chasing after
Mm.
this or chasing after that, I'm suggesting that that is not a productive way to spend your time, or
Well,
for
Johnny
me to
Barnes,
spend my time.
yeah. Well, Johnny Barnes always say, how can you get rid of racism when racism is already in the structure? How can you get rid of racism in the football field when actually it's in society? You need to get
Well,
it out of society.
he's absolutely right. I mean,
Yes.
he's absolutely right. But it shows the fallacy of saying you're trying
Mm.
to get rid of racism. One of the most obnoxious sins in the world has to be pedophilia, hmm?
Mm.
The abuse of children. What I don't hear anyone saying is that we can't stop this until there's no more pedophilia in society,
Mm.
right? Because you can't say, let's say some of my spiritual friends would say that pedophilia is a spirit, right? So,
Yes.
so you'd say it grabs hold of some people and they just pursue children. Now, what are we going to say? That, well, what can we do? We can't do nothing until that spirit is completely run out of town. No, what we do is we put strong laws in place, and we put guardrails around our children, and we try to protect them. And if anybody messes with them, the strong arm of the law is after them. That's if them don't get something else from the parent as
Yeah.
well, right?
Mm.
So what you do is you identify that there is a challenge, and you work out how you're going to deal with that challenge. What I'm saying is, when we make racism an exception to that rule, that what you have to do is deal with it rather
Yes.
than spend all of your time, and by dealing with it, I mean, where it occurs, since it's in the fabric, where it occurs, you deal with it. So for example, if somebody racializes me, then they will certainly know about it. But if I'm going to succeed in life in this country or anywhere else, I am going to have to learn how I am going to deal with racism without it occupying every waking hour of my life.
So what you're actually saying is that one has got to be aware, and one can see, and one can acknowledge that there's some racist element around you, but that doesn't mean to
Plenty.
say that doesn't mean to say you're gonna fight. What the song say? are gonna fight my battle. You don't fight every single battles. Is that
Well,
what you're saying as well?
well,
You have to learn.
in a way, you're
Yeah,
going to be fighting it. Well, the
yeah,
first thing I'm saying is, I
yeah.
think it's a fool's paradise to
Mm,
buy into the idea that you can't succeed unless racism is complete and gotten
is
rid of from
right, right.
society, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
I mentioned earlier that the children of Israel going into the promised land, they were very clear, the spies were very clear that there are giants in this land.
yes,
Where there are giants, you're going to have to find ways of overcoming them. David found a way of overcoming one particular giant by licking him down with a slingshot, right?
yes, yes.
That's one way. But if there are giants in the land, you're going to have to find ways of how you're going to deal with it and still get
Mm,
what you want out of the place. And I'm saying that racism is no different to that. But we have been sold this crazy idea that we can get rid of it, this thing which is germane, which is inherent, which is embedded
mm,
in Western society. We have been sold this lie that we're going to be able to get rid of it one day. You're going to wake up one morning and it's gone.
mm,
Oh, hallelujah,
mm.
promised land. And I'm saying, no, nothing don't go
Yes,
so.
yes,
You're going to have to learn to deal with racism through the strategies and tactics
yes,
that deal with it. And my main point is that you deal with it not by simply spending all your time trying to beg, please stop being so nasty to me. Why don't you love me? Can't you see I'm black and beautiful? And so on. But instead,
yes,
in the book, I say that this is a power game, right? This is a power game.
yes.
And what
It's good.
we have to learn is
Yeah.
how
Mm,
we can become more powerful than the opposing foe. And we
yes.
do that by exercising our own agency, by taking responsibility for us, and by recognizing how we must become powerful. And I named four power things. We need to become
Yeah.
powerful spiritually. We need to become
Mm,
powerful economically. We
yes.
need to become powerful politically, and we
Yes.
need to become powerful socially.
Mm,
People don't have to love you. Where I live here, I'm one of few black people around here. I'm not asking nobody if we can buy this house because we have the money to
mm,
buy it. We buy it,
mm.
right? I'm not campaigning outside saying, "Are you going to let me in?" No,
Yes.
I have the. So it is power that must meet power. It's
Yes.
not begging that must meet power. It's not pleading that must meet power.
So what you're actually saying, there are laws that one can operate within at the same time, and
Yes,
and even if there are incidents of overt racism or so, there are laws also that you can use
yes,
to protect yourself at the same time. You know,
yes. But
I
most of all,
yeah, mm,
be about your business. I put it that I talk about
yeah,
power. Build your power base.
really a power
Build
base,
your power
build your
base.
power.
I'm reading a book at the moment by this guy Morgan Housel. I don't know if you can see it.
Mm,
Morgan
mm,
Housel, The Psychology of Money. And he
yes,
reminds me and reminds us in that book of how you can become wealthy by saving a little at a time. Hmm? And it's not about
yes,
being flashy rich. Now we see, and again I tabulate this in the book, how it is that our four parents here in this country use the practice of partner to to build their economic base.
base,
And
yes.
through it, they were able to buy properties, they were able to navigate their way around. Now, we in our time need also to learn to save and to build generational wealth. We should be spending our time, and this is my black theology friends when they get catch up with this. I am saying I want to see not just you being clever in your critique of white
Mm,
racism. I want you to get clever critiquing, analyzing, showing how the black community can become strong and powerful and flourish in the
mm,
face of the giants which are in the land.
yes. No, yes, that is very powerful there. And this links me to a question which I was trying to come around to, the balance between maintaining cultural identity and integrating into into the British society. Let's use that
Yeah,
for argument's sake.
indeed.
The cultural identity and integrating, because some will say, therefore, you loses yourself in a sense. You got to lose yourself and become a part of. You've seen different racial groups who have maintained their
Of course.
cultural identity. At the same time, the government, in some respect, different political, will say you need to actually lose where you're coming from
Yeah.
and get
Listen,
involved. Yeah,
I can understand why a government wants to buy into cohesion, community
yeah,
cohesion, right? I get it. I understand why they would want to buy into it. And I believe in cohesion as well. I believe a society needs to cohere.
yes,
It needs to learn how to cohere diversity.
mm,
However, going back again to my Jeremiah text, one of the things I think I hear Jeremiah saying to the exiles in Babylon is never forget who you are.
yes,
You're in Babylon, but you are a Jew in Babylon.
yes, yes,
I also use the example of the incarnation. The story, the biblical story of the incarnation is how
mm,
God became man, human, and lived among us in the person of Jesus. That's the
mm,
Christian story.
yes,
The Word became flesh and dwelt
yeah,
among us. John
yes,
says, yeah. So there is a sense in which when you are living in a place, if you're me living in a place like this, you want to live incarnationally. Hmm?
mm,
So it means just like the Word, the Logos, did not cease to be Logos when it
mm,
became human. Hmm? The Christian theology is that what you had in Jesus was the God man Jesus, right?
yeah,
So you have to, you remain God even as you're also man if you're Jesus. Now, for us, what it means is that I do not see any grounds to side with those who believe that what you have to do is abandon your
root,
history and your culture and your identity. No, sir, quite the reverse. Quite the reverse. What we and we're seeing a reassertion of this now, by the way,
mm,
particularly since Floyd was killed.
yes,
We're seeing now almost a legitimizing of the other's culture. Hmm? So I can get soursop, bun, hard bread, cocoa,
mm,
yam, and whatever it is I want on Soho Road in Birmingham, right?
mm,
Or in West Bromwich or wherever. Is that an abandoning of one's identity and culture? No, it's the affirming of that. So what should happen when we come into a place like this, if you're the Jews going down into Babylon, or if you're a Caribbean person coming into Britain, is that what you bring yourself with all that you are, authentically you,
bells
and
and
you
whistles,
bring it
yes,
into this space and you contribute it to the whole, right? You contribute what you have and who you are to what now makes up the whole. I mean, I'm not a mechanic, but if you were to look in under the bonnet of a car, what you would find would be lots of different parts, all making the car run.
works, yes,
If everything was a camshaft, the car wouldn't go anywhere.
mm,
If everything in the car was the steering rod, the car wouldn't go anywhere, right? What you need are all these various parts coming together. If you want multicultural Britain, then what you're really saying is that you want many different cultures cohering together to create a multiculture. You don't create a multicultural by telling people to leave their cultures at the door, leave it outside. No,
mm,
you bring it in, and then together we live out who we are and cohere, just like a super duper Rolls Royce engine with
mm,
all the different parts. but each part has to remain itself. It has to know, yeah, I mean, it's not a person, of course, but it has to have its identity, and it plays out that identity within the driving. Paul tells us this about the church, right? About the church being many members. And he said, look at your physical body. If the whole body were an eye, well, what kind of body would that be? Where were the hearing if the whole body were hearing? If the whole body was heart, important as that is, that wouldn't be a human being. You need all the various parts cohering together. So that's my answer to the question about ethnic cultural identity. You bring it with you and you live it out in the space, contributing it to the whole.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what we are seeing and what we are hearing are some of the solutions in order to flourish in Babylon. Sir Joe Aldred, we are now up to 1 hour, and another question I want to ask you before we go ask the question. I'm gonna let it rest with you. What role do you envision for Black-led churches in fostering the agency and self-determination in discussing your book, and also undergirding what we talked about regarding the cultural aspect, because sometimes it is said that we have sort of left that sort of umbrella, that body, which something was used to sort of hold us together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my show, Dialogue That Matters. I'm with Dr. Joe Aldred, and we're discussing the book Flourishing in Babylon. And we're up to the hour, and let us just have a little quick break. Yeah, I want to thank those who are joining tonight on Instagram, those who are joining on YouTube, Facebook, also TikTok Overflow, and of course you can watch the audio version on podcast after. Dr. Joe Aldred, thank you for staying with me beyond the hours. Let's go into the midnight. We're in the UK. All we can hear is Peanut Wally. Actually,
Catch them and put them in a bottle.
do you know which song I was listening to today? And it was so remind me of home. I don't know if you know it. Um, Santa ketchup in a mango tree. Santa ketchup in a mango tree. I don't know if you know that, but
I'm not sure I
it,
do.
it's a very old song. And it's when I listened to it today, and my son, who don't know nothing about this song, was tapping his feet,
Yeah.
and it's actually your history. Even though I don't believe in Santa Claus, but it is something they do. And in Jamaica,
Yeah, yeah,
there
yeah.
was a song in Jamaica one time by, I forget what his name, and he says, "We don't have no snow, we don't have no sleigh, but what we have is Christmas J.A." So we're talking,
Ah,
so you're culturalizing it to where you are, and
absolutely.
like the song Santa ketchup in a mango tree. Only
Yeah.
Jamaicans can talk about Santa Claus get ketchup in a mango tree or something like that. So
Well,
it's a whole aspect of assimilating our culture. Um,
indeed.
yeah,
Indeed. And that's what we're seeing happening. So
yes,
do you want me to go back to this question about the black church and what
yes,
role
yes.
I
That's
see
where we
for
go.
it?
That's where we are now. Yes, the
Mm.
black-led
And there
churches
was
in
a second
fostering
there
it.
was a
Yes.
second part of the question which I need you to just repeat.
Yeah, what role do you envision for black-led churches in fostering agency and self-determination you discuss in your book? Because
Yes.
we're talking about the cultural aspect, and also the fact that it is always said sometimes that we've sort of left that sort of umbrella of the churches that churches
Yeah.
together, that brought us together, that kept us
Yes.
together
Well,
at the same time. Yeah.
indeed. Indeed. Well, in the book, again, I cite the black churches as a
Mm,
good example, not perfect,
yes.
but a good
Yes.
example of flourishing in Babylon.
Yes. I like that
These
word. Sorry,
churches,
I just love it.
hmm?
Sorry, I just say I just want to say I just love it. Flourishing in Babylon. It's a nice tone, and it's a nice
Yes,
ring. You know, it's
yes.
something which is really
Well,
powerful. I believe. Yes.
and again, I hope people don't think I'm being disrespectful to Britain when I call it Babylon, because I'm
Yes.
just using a play on the terminologies, because
Yes.
that Babylonian experience, I'm saying, has some lessons to teach us today in
Yes.
Britain, which I'm calling AKA Babylon, right? So
Yes, sir.
it's
Yes.
not this at all disrespectful. But I do cite the Black Church as a good example of flourishing.
Mm,
I cite it from a personal experience. I,
mm,
as a 15, 16-year-old boy coming into England, found it immensely, immeasurably
mm.
significant that the church, the congregation that nurtured me ever since I came here from that age, was a kind of a throwback to the church I went to in Top Mountain, St. Catherine, Jamaica. Lots of the
Yes.
people there were actually here. And that is a place where people conk me in the head, pray for me, rebuke me, chastise me, praise me, and everything else. It's provided for me that space that no matter what else is happening out in the wider world, on a Sunday or in the week, and generally on the phone, was a community that was supportive and so on. So personally, I have a lot of time for the praise I give to the Black Church. Beyond that, of course, what that shows is how an institution or a movement can produce people by providing that stable environment. But I also cited that when, as an example of flourishing, in that when back in the early days of what we call the Windrush era from the 1940s and 50s, 60s, when these churches started in people's living rooms and started to go into school halls and so on, long before we had nice buildings as we have now, many in the mainstream churches referred to those churches as not churches at all, but sects, sects, right? They saw them as sects. They were not churches. But that fledgling movement had some peculiarities to it, which I think shows strength. They were independent financially. They never went cap in hand to nobody, begging, no government begging for money. Right? The members supported it, buy the van, repair the van, keep
Yes.
it on the road, pay for the pastor, right? And now some of the means, we can quarrel about, and I have better ideas about how we might do that. But whatever the means, the fact is that those churches have remained steadfast, self-supporting, through their own agency, through their own sense of self-determining where they're going. And
Mm,
today, people like me and greater than me find ourselves walking through all kinds of portals that lead to the hierarchy of the British system because they value what we bring, that we bring from that place that was independent. My pastor, if you've ever been to Aberdeen Street, Winston Green, Birmingham, the pastor then, sadly deceased now, when he decided that we needed a new building, or we decided together, and he started to talk to the council about where we might relocate. The council wanted to push us to some backwater. And I still remember Pastor McCullough standing up and saying, I am not going there.
yes.
I want a spot on the main road.
No back bush business. No back bush. No back a bush business.
And if you come to Winston Green and see that church is bang on the main Winston Green Road, that's what Pastor Mac wanted, in the corner between Aberdeen Street and Winston Green Road. It was that steely sense
Mm,
of self-determination. That steely sense that say we're not begging you for nothing, right?
mm,
We have the money to build this church, or if we don't have it, we're going to raise it. All
yeah.
£300,000 of it 30 odd 40 odd years ago, which was a whole heap of money back then.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm saying, in terms of self-determination, in terms of agency, the Black Church has indeed been a shining example of how to do it yourself,
Mm,
right? Don't bow the knee to nobody. Don't beg nobody for nothing. Build it, and then when you built it, guess what? The birds of the air come and want to pitch in it and
yes.
relax in and use the facility. So there are many challenges that the Black Church in Britain face. Um, Not least something you touched on, Sylvan,
Mm,
which is a lot of the people who grew up in that church now, their children, their grandchildren, no longer frequent those kinds of churches. And that's a bit of
Yes.
a double-edged sword, but it needs our attention. On the one side, black people were never all Pentecostal. They were always Black Baptists, Black Anglicans, Black Methodists, Black Catholics. And some of them did come across during the early days when they were nudged out of their place by unwelcome and
Yes.
joined some of the Pentecostal churches. Now they've swung the door wide open. In fact, the Church of England is busy using his power to cream off some of our best and to
Yes.
pull them into their ranks to work for them in various ways, including
Okay.
training them as ministers, right? So there's a lot of competition now. Those churches that had rejected the blackface in the 40s, 50s, 60s are now welcome, bending over backwards to
Incorporated.
welcome to, to welcome us. Just recently, the new bishop for
Yes.
Aston has just been named,
That's correct.
another black woman. So the Black Pentecostal Church has a job in its hand, not well to keep strong in numbers and
Yes.
financially as well, because where the money comes from, given that those people who were giving us their members are now taking them away,
Right.
and a number of black people, and I've noticed the trend that a lot of middle class black people, professional black people,
Mm.
if they are not moving across to the mainstream churches, which not a lot of that happening, but those who belong there are staying there, they are moving across to the kind of church you go to, Kensington Temple or a
Uh,
Birmingham Christian Center. A lot
uh,
of middle class professional black people go to those churches, what used to be called house churches. They're sort of city churches now,
mm.
where if you look across, I'm sure it's true for Kensington Temple as it would be true for Birmingham City Church, for example. If you scan the congregation,
Yeah.
it's 90% non-white. Or put
Mm.
another way, maybe only 10% of the population are white. And yet
Yes.
you'll find that the leadership, certainly the key leadership of senior pastor, is nearly always with a white man.
Mm.
Mm?
Mm.
But what some professional black people tell me is that they prefer those churches because it's orderly. It's more in keeping with their own status in society.
Mm.
You don't have nobody running around speaking in tongues and making noise and carrying on in those
Mm.
churches, right? And they can guarantee that there's going to be a decent sermon, even if it doesn't set the world on fire. They'll have a decently well thought through sermon on a Sunday. I have to say that I understand those kinds of caveats and those kinds of reasoning and why people, if you're not proud to take somebody, if you're a professional, whatever, say you're a banker, right? And
Yeah.
you want to take your colleague to church. If you take your colleague to church and what is going on looks a bit crazy, right? You might feel a bit embarrassed. And
Mm.
therefore you may not invite them. Okay, so
Yeah.
so I think the black church now, in right now at the in the 21st century, have some deep thinking to do about its identity, about how it appears, who is it attracting. And I say
Mm.
one last thing. I could say much more, but I say one
Yeah.
last thing about
Yeah.
them. One of the things that I've noticed, maybe the two responses. One is a church like the Tab, maybe in London, which is vibrant and young and modern and
Mm.
and so on. It's gone that way, right? And then some of the other churches I've noticed have gone the other way. They have become more, I call it, country Caribbeanized,
Okay.
because
Can you
what
break that
goes
down?
on.
Can you break that down? The country Cabernet.
I am. Let me break it down. They are appealing to the instincts more of what we used to call the unlearned, the unsophisticated, and so on.
Mm.
Um, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully.
Yes. Yes. I can
But
see
what
that.
I'm
Yes.
saying is, I've noticed whilst there is a cohort leaning towards church, that is more constructive, more liturgical,
Yes.
more coherent. There's another bit of it that has
Mm.
leaned the other way. And
Yeah.
you have to give the Holy Ghost time, and it's well, where you say you're going to finish at 2 o'clock. Well, it depends how the Holy Ghost leads, and that sort of stuff, and the
Shanda.
preaching
Shanda.
is
Yes.
The
Uh,
preaching is just very often shouting and yelling and still lacking in coherence. The Black church is, in my view, having played a pivotal role up to now, is in a critical space. And some of our churches really do need to spend some time looking at their liturgical shape, whether some of what is happening is not just feel good, but is actually good.
yes.
And training has a lot to do with it, but it's more than that. I think it's leadership. Maybe I should say,
So
one
what
of the
is?
challenges, of course, is that leadership very often is somewhere else. So the Church of God Prophecies leadership is in America. The New Testament Church of God leadership at the international level is also in America. And I think those churches that don't have control over over the theological, doctrinal ways of their church are
Mm,
having difficulty because they can't change nothing unless it comes from up there. We've
yes.
seen, maybe I should stop here, but we've seen, for example, how with John Francis with Ruach
Yes.
has retained something of that old-fashioned Pentecostal verve and what have you, um,
Mm,
and has really made it grow. I don't know, if it will go on into the future, but he's certainly
yeah.
made a success of it today. So there are different models that churches can adopt. What I am saying, though, to my own tradition, is that they need to spend some time in the quiet room reflecting what is the nature of church and how well are they providing a service as they provided for me years ago.
Yes.
How much are they providing for people like me at the
And
moment,
yeah.
and like
And,
you?
and you're so right about this because the whole church aspect, especially in the UK, plays a fundamental role. I was speaking the other day to someone and talking about something called God and government, mean to say where's the role of the church when it comes on to major decisions which are being made in
Yes,
society, when you talk about even things regarding of recent days, the immigration,
yes.
um taxes and all those other, where's the voices of the churches speak, but you say if the church is sort of I don't use the word dilapidated or it's a bit, what should I say, having issues of its identity, then therefore the community will also suffer as a result.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
That's true. And I think we're seeing some of that. There are a number, and I know this because that's where I've been working for the last 20, 30 years before I retired a couple of years ago.
yeah,
There are a number of what I might call ecumenical agencies
yeah,
which are attempting to bring some cohesion and coherence to what is a very diverse Black church um, context here in this
yes,
country, right? So
yes.
we talk loosely about the Black church, but it's not one church. It's probably 300 different,
Mm,
different types of churches, differently named churches. So they may behave in a similar way, but they all have different governance, right?
yeah,
Um, so to get them to speak together on anything is going to be challenging unless you have an instrument by which it can do that. They can do that together, and there are
mm,
agencies. Up in my friend Doye up in Manchester runs something called the Apostolic Congress. They cohere a certain proportion of that. I do some work with the National
mm,
Church Leaders Forum, chaired by Pastor Ade Omuba and Dion Gravesandi, and we try to do some of that speaking. And there are a number of other agencies like that that coheres a certain number of churches. What we haven't done so well to date, together or individually as agencies, is really find ways of speaking into the sort of situations that you are referring to. But
yes, yes, yes.
there are attempts to try.
Mm,
Some people may be interested to know that we published a manifesto, a Black Church political manifesto. Twice now, I was very involved with the setting up and the publishing of those. And if you type that in online, NCLF Black Church Political Manifesto, you will find it. It exists as a document and it highlights 11 areas No, that manifesto we have circulated all through government. In fact, a copy of it went to all MPs in Parliament, so they will see the 11 things that we say are the big issues for us. We did it before the election, and so on. So the answer to your question is there are
Yes.
attempts to do it, but it is difficult to do. You have to read Marcia Dixon's monthly or bi-monthly magazine, Keep the Faith.
Keep the
Uh,
faith. Yeah.
there's a recent publication too by Mowbray Livingstone of the magazine that came out for a while in the 1980s called Exodus.
Mm.
And he's marked the 40th anniversary of when Exodus started with a massive publication, 140 odd pages, I believe.
Well, Mark.
Again,
Well,
if
well.
you read
Yeah. No,
those documents, those
I was
documents will
just.
speak
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that Bob Marley said, "Movements of Jah people." Exodus.
Yes,
Movements of Jah
movements
people.
of your people, and
Movement of
but
Jah
what
people.
what we need is a Bob Marley who can get on top of the airwaves.
Yes.
Yeah, so there are attempts to speak into those, and much of it goes on without ever hitting the news.
Yeah. So therefore, in wrapping up now, and in a way, I can see some of the answers to what I'm going to ask now has been mentioned during the course of this discussion. Like, how can the principles outlined in your book be applied to address current challenges such as racial inequality and social injustice? And I'm sure you have dot them along the line, but in a sort of summing up,
Yeah, well,
Sir Aldred, yes,
I believe that the principles in the book, and there's a thesis there. It's a good 70, 80,000 word book. There's a
yes,
thesis there which spans a line. It's the suggestion is that we must tackle the challenges we face
mm,
by applying our own agency and our own sense of self-determining.
yes,
That's the key to what I'm saying. Do not think that your liberation is coming from the east or from the west,
yes.
that you have to get rid of something before you can.
Something can
No,
happen. Yes,
what we must find is how can I, in the space I am in now,
yes,
how can I become powerful here?
mm,
And when I am powerful here, I begin to punch my weight in the space, notwithstanding that there are challenges. And there's a lot of work that has gone on, anti-racism work.
mm,
And I don't say that some of it don't need to go on now, but I think it runs the risk of detracting us from
yes,
the very important work of
mm,
building our own monument, building our own selves economically, socially, politically, spiritually.
yes. Is ecospace make sense? Building our own ecospace? Is that a right term?
Well, eco space meaning something that is grand, something that is
Yes,
big, something that is
yes,
organic.
yes,
Then yes, we need to build it, and we need to give we need to throw away the lie
yes.
that until racism has been abolished from British society, we cannot succeed. That
Can
is
I
a
just
lie from hell.
can I just go off into a couple of things there? Like in recent days, okay, this is a classic example, and I find this one very okay. Recently, there's this black lady named Kemi Badenoch who was being appointed. Well, she won the leadership very square and fair for the Conservative Party, and she's now the leader of one of the most successful political party in the Western Hemisphere for a while. But I can see some of the kickback effect from our people, our people, really having a go at her, as to say she's the some words like the downfall of black people. She will, and yeah, it's sometimes can be very discouraging because when you see persons rising at the same time, you find that the persons who sometimes want to take them down more are their own people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me quickly respond to that.
Yeah.
I am from the NCLF. We wrote Kemi a letter of congratulations on
Mm.
becoming leader of the Conservative Party. In the same way, we wrote to Keir Starmer,
Yes.
congratulating him on becoming Prime Minister, right?
Yes.
Because they're the leader of the two main parties in the
Yes.
country. Unfortunately, in the space where we are, some people believe that if you're black, you can only be a Labour voter.
Mm.
If you vote especially conservative,
Yeah.
you're not their kind of black. Well, and therefore, when somebody like Kemi becomes leader
Mm.
of the National Party, she comes in for a lot of flack.
Yes.
My view is people are entitled to their own
Yes.
perspectives, right? So they can say whatever they want about Kemi or Keir Starmer or anybody else. Of course, they're entitled to that. But I would just say that I believe that we as Black people, we should celebrate success, even when success doesn't look like
Yes.
us. And even if it doesn't feel
Mm.
like you, but you can't just agree with those who will only agree with you politically. Kemi is a
Mm.
conservative, right? She believes in
Yes.
conservative values, and therefore many of the
Yes.
things she said will be irksome to left-leaning, and particularly those who are further away from the center on the left side of politics.
Yes.
She will no doubt all keep on rubbing their sore spots politically.
Yes. Yes.
But then, she's a conservative, right? She
Mm.
speaks conservative values. If David Lammy is Labour, Diane Abbott is Labour,
Labor. Mm.
they will speak about issues from their political
From a
vantage
socialist
points,
perspective, yes.
and
Yes.
they're entitled to it. What I
Mm.
just hope is that we together would be generous to each other,
Yes.
notwithstanding difference of political views. And if
Mm.
you can't rejoice at a Kemi becoming leader of the Conservative Party because you don't share her politics or
Mm.
view, well, at least, quietly wish her well.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Bad
And
mouthing people, is not good.
it's,
None
it's
of
co-
us
it,
like
it,
it when,
yes.
when it happens to
Yeah.
us.
It will be deemed to be counterproductive at the same time, and it goes against the whole developing. What should I say? Flourishing in
Well, I don't
Babylon.
listen. I don't know what people think they gain from it, but what I would
Yes.
say is that I want to wish you well, even if I don't share your political
Yes.
views and your political ideology. I
Yes.
still
Yes.
want to wish you well,
Yeah.
and I
Finally.
wish Kemi well. I
Yes. Yes.
without hypocrisy.
Finally, if I go over a bit to Jamaica there, because we talk about flourishing in Babylon in the UK, but in Jamaica there's a Babylon.
Yeah.
It is deemed to see like there's a Babylon system at the same time, and therefore there's a flourishing aspect which also need to be done. We are seeing the advent of the king being removed as the head of state.
Yes.
A bill has been tabled. You're seeing the imminent rise of Mark Golding possibly to be the next prime minister if or when they call a general election. But Sergio, even in my interview last night with a key person from the JLP, there's a point which keeps coming up. He's a white man um, running in Jamaica at this time when you're removing a white man as head of state. There's this issue which is happening, and it is not just one person saying it. You're seeing it through the Arab. You're seeing it from persons from a Pan-Africanist thinking, even in the UK, to say a black man time now. How can they have a white man running to become a prime minister in Jamaica? What do you say about that? I
Well,
know we're going somewhere. I just want to get a sound bite on that before we go.
no, indeed. Well, first of all, I'm not. Well, how can I put it? I am anti foreign heads
Mm,
of a sovereign country. Right? I'm not in favor of that. Therefore, I am in favor, on a personal level, of Jamaica becoming a republic and
yes.
not having the British crown hanging on after 200 odd years of independence. I
Yeah.
mean, of liberation from slavery, and then independence was 70 years or whatever. So yes, I think it's time that the King of England, of Britain, not be the King of Jamaica, right? But
Yes.
Jamaica is a former slave colony, as we mentioned earlier, and so there are still lingering embers from what burned during those years when white people oppressed black people there on the island. And we notice from when Jamaica became independent, the first few national leaders were kind of almost white, right?
Yes.
I remember when Hugh Shearer became prime minister. People were saying then that was the first proper black man,
Yes.
that first ever proper black man. The West Indies cricket team that we know and love, not so much these days. In its early days, the captain was always white. Why?
Mm,
Because they were all playing into this white supremacist ideology. Okay,
mm,
so there's still some of that lingering, and there's a bitter taste in some people's mouth. How can we as a black country have somebody who look white? But I would say, where you have a Jamaican who is Jamaican, right?
mm.
And Jamaica boasts out of many one
One
people.
people. Yes.
Well, you cannot jolly well say that the only person who can hold the position of prime minister must be this one kind of people. No,
Yes. Mm,
if you support the notion that Jamaica is this polyglot of people groups come together through indentured laborers, through indigenous people, through the slave trade, and we have grown up together in that space, right? We all mix up. If somebody is
mm,
lighter, no, lighter of complexion, and they become leader, you're going to say, no, they can't do that because that's against the spirit of out of
mm.
many one people. We should jostle with each other as Jamaicans, not as black and white or Asian or whatever in between. We
Mm.
should be Jamaican.
Yes, yes. That's the most important thing. Well, Sir Joe Aldred, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight and breaking down Flourishing in Babylon. Ladies and gentlemen, the book is there on Amazon. Remember to reach out and get it. There it is. It is Flourishing in Babylon, £25. Black British Agency and Self Determination by Joe Aldred. You said there's other ways we can get by Kindle, isn't it? Um,
Oh yes, it's available from Amazon too. It's available as a
yes,
Kindle
yes, yes.
book. The
And
reason I talk about Amazon is because it's a place most people know. I mean, it is
yes,
available from
yes,
in any online bookseller, including from the publishers SCM Press. But
yes,
but the cheapest I've seen it is on Amazon.
yes, yes. And Michelle in the States, she says she'll be ordering it. It's a good book for Christmas as well. Good
Thank you,
read.
Michelle. But buy
Yes.
10, Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle, there you go. Buy 10 and distribute it to all your conservative virgin. I'm sorry, I was teasing you. And also one of the key thing is Uncle Joe regarding this book is that it's a good read and it is a good time also for black people to read more.
Absolutely. There
Yeah,
was a time in the old days when they used to say, if you want to hide something from black people, put it in a
the
book.
book. Yes.
Right? I hope we are a long way. This is my 10th book.
Wow.
And if anybody goes on Amazon, for example, they will see my other books, which I've written
Yeah.
over the years. And
Yeah.
I continue to encourage us to read,
Yes.
read, read,
Yes.
read.
But don't you think that the whole advent of social media and I, I mean, aren't well, people are watching, some are reading, but it takes away the essence of the book, isn't it?
Well, I know that most publishers now have found that the way people um, consume their books has changed. 20
Yeah.
years ago, you were buying a hard copy, right? There's no question about it. Now people want to be able to voice it. They want to read it on their phones and so on.
Yes.
Um, what I think is a challenge is the way in which society has changed,
Yes.
and if my book, if you go to Chat GPT and
Chat GPT.
say
Yes,
give,
yes.
yeah, and say give me a summary of Joe Aldred's book, Flourishing in Babylon, Black Agency and Self-Determined, Black British Agency and Self-Determination. It will give you a summary in about maybe 200 words, right? And
Well,
that is the
yeah.
challenge now. Everybody wants just everything in bite size, right? So
Chunk.
reading a book
Yeah.
from cover to cover is a challenge for many people. How do you do that? But you don't have to read it from cover to cover. You know, I would say to people, read the introduction and then look at the different chapters and see which one you want to dive into if you don't want to read the whole
Yes,
book. But I
yes,
think,
yes.
you know, reading is how we grow by exposing ourselves to other people's thinking, other people ways of viewing the world, and you know, as we read, we absorb, we reject, etc., 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 but we're building up our font of knowledge. So my book is not the only one, but I encourage people to read it. Spent a lot of time writing it, and I hope that you find it interesting.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. And any last word you got to say, Miss? Anything you might
No, I'm
miss that you want?
just would like to say a big thank you to you for
Yes, sir.
inviting me onto your program. I hope that
Yes,
those
sir.
who watch and listen will find something useful, and but especially uh, buy a copy of Flourishing in Babylon. Make my
Definitely.
Christmas.
And as Michelle Clark said, read, read, read. I have a library in my home. I grow my children and grandchildren up in the bookstores. Borders bookstore. I don't even know if that bookstore exists anymore. Sir Aldred, I want to thank you so much for coming on, and all the best, sir, and have a wonderful Christmas. And we have to come back again with other books. I must say, okay.
Indeed.
Thank
Bless
you,
you.
sir. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye
bye.
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 Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining tonight with Dr. Joe Aldred. Very interesting discussion that we're talking about the flourishing in Babylon. Flourishing in Babylon. And welcome to and thank you for joining me on Dialogue That Matters, Sunday night special. It will be on podcast uh, as well, the audio version, which you can get. You can go to Spotify. I want to thank those who are joining me also on um, Instagram. Instagram, of course, it doesn't stay. It doesn't stay on Instagram. TikTok, it doesn't stay there. But you can go onto YouTube and you can see the full show, and you can go on to what should I say, Facebook, and see the full show. There's much more discussion that will be coming on as well over the months that come. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night and have a wonderful Sunday. And I hope that the message of flourishing Babylon resonate with one and all, and we can actually use it as an empowering tool, as something very, very empowering, inspirational, motivational, and also uplifting as well. Okay, thank you very much, and have a good night. Bye bye.